Let me start with something most people don't realize about themselves. You're probably not waiting for the right opportunity. You are waiting for a version of yourself that feels more complete, more confident, more certain, more ready. And the problem is that that version never arrives the way you expect because readiness is not a moment or a feeling. It's actually a delayed strategy that your mind is using without you noticing. You must know this. People don't fail because they can't do something. They fail because they keep postponing the moment they begin, waiting to feel ready enough. And at the end of the day, the distance between where you are and where you want to go is usually not talent, it's not intelligence, it's not even opportunity. Most of the time is permission, but not permission from others, permission from yourself. I've seen this pattern for years while working in media, communications, and high pressure environments where people are constantly expected to perform, decide, and move on their uncertainty. And this is what I've learned. The people who succeed are not always the most prepared. They're the ones who stop waiting to feel perfect before they act. People constantly ask me how in my 14 years of professional career, I've landed so many high-profile jobs like TV reporter for national television, or how I ended up directing communications for a national political committee, or any of the other jobs that I've done. The truth is this: you don't end up in rooms like that unless that you've already learned how to move through uncertainty long before you ever arrive there. What helped me is that life has made me an expert on moving through uncertain times. Let me tell you a little anecdote where it all started for me. When my parents decided to immigrate from Cuba to Honduras in search of freedom and better opportunities, I found myself in a situation where I didn't feel anchored anywhere. I wasn't fully adapting to the environment I was in. I was 16 in a new country, very unhappy. I talked to my parents and they tried to help me by changing schools. Within a short period of time, I had already rotated through multiple schools, so I clearly wasn't integrating. I was navigating through a sea of uncertainty, new culture and everything. So in the middle of all that, I kept hearing this little voice in my head that said, "This is not your place." During uncertain times, we tend to ignore that voice. But at that time, I did not, and he saved me. So I sat down with them again, and I said, "I've tried everything. I don't want to go to school here. Something needs to change." In a few weeks, we left Honduras and began our journey to the United States. So even at 16, I learned something very simple. You don't always wait for certainty to speak. Sometimes you create movement by naming what needs to change, even when the future is unclear. That's life. You don't always have to wait until everything feels stable before you change direction. Sometimes you have to decide inside uncertainty. That was one of the many moments through our immigration journey where we had to make a drastic decision under uncertainty. This experience built me up for the future. Years later, I went back to that same dangerous border as a journalist and retraced my steps and shared the story on national television. What stayed with me out of that experience was that, many people wrote to me when the story aired, but there was this young woman who wrote to me and said that after hearing my story and my family's story, it gave her the courage to leave Cuba. It completely changed her life. We all want to be inspiring, but inspiration doesn't come from certainty. It comes from moving through uncertain times. And my life has been full of those moments. Even after I graduated college here in the US, I remember packing up my bags and moving from Florida to Los Angeles without any real guarantee or a job lined up. And I showed up at Fox Sports headquarters in Los Angeles, the second DMA in the United States. For those who don't know, DMA is basically the list and ranking of all the media markets, and there are like 210. So me, fresh out of college with a laptop under my arm and a reel I had edited myself, I showed up in market number 2. And I wanted to speak to somebody from Fox Sports, so I sat down in the lobby and waited. Kids out of college usually don't do that. They start in places like, Oklahoma or El Paso. But that day, I met the vice president of Fox Deportes, and after he generously gave me 15 minutes of his time, I landed my first real job in television. It wouldn't have happened if I wasn't bold enough and if I didn't decide to move through uncertainty. Because sometimes progress is not about certainty, it's about decision under pressure. And this is where it becomes universal because everyone has this pattern. speaking in public, starting a business, posting something online, applying for something you feel unqualified for, walking into a room and deciding whether to speak or not. Different situations, but same internal mechanism. The truth is, readiness is not a requirement. It is something that comes after action. You don't become ready and then begin. You begin and then become capable of what you started. This is a deeply human pattern. And the reason why it's so hard sometimes for people to break it is because it feels responsible. It feels disciplined. And your mind is very good at protecting you from making mistakes. So instead of saying, I'm afraid to start, you say, I want to refine it. I want to wait for a little bit longer till it's perfect. But the gap is getting wider and wider. And you keep waiting for that risk to be invisible, but it doesn't become invisible because starting something means being visible while still being incomplete. So stop asking, am I ready? And just start with the smallest version of this that you can do today. It doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be the best version. It needs to be the usable version, because clarity doesn't come before action. It comes through action. And the moment you stop requiring yourself to feel ready before you begin your project, you become active. It'll give you momentum, and that will change the game. That will change everything, because remember, momentum is not created by confidence. Confidence is created by momentum. So stop waiting to feel ready. Start moving. Movement will create everything else for you. Tick tock, tick tock.